Hi friends, Molton here. So in this video I'll be going through my second attempt at the Australian Junior Championships in 2004, where even though we were playing for different age categories, everyone played in the same under 18 event, which was great because I got to play players who were much older than me and also had a lot more experience. I learned that many of the opening ideas and gambits I tried previously didn't really cut it at this level, which prompted me to really take a second look at my opening repertoire and make a lot of changes soon after. So this first example we can see came from the Exchange French, where I was still going for the same idea over and over again, but as we see, we just didn't work in this particular game. So after knight c6, it's already a little bit different from what I'm used to. Here I can't play the normal bishop d3 I would normally play. Instead I opted for capturing here. Knight takes d5, and I can't play bishop c4 here because I was worried about some knight b6 ideas. So I opted for bishop b5, already starting to deviate from what I was used to. Knight to e2, castles and castles. Bishop g4, I played the move f3. After bishop f5, queen b3 hitting the knight, trying to improve my pawn structure. Captured with the bishop. Knight a5, queen went back, and black played the move c6. So already we're a little bit unfamiliar with this position, and we weren't really able to adapt at this point in time. I think this was my major problem. And here the best move for white is to go bishop a4, but I made a serious mistake and played the move bishop to d3, offering an exchange of pieces, thinking my opponent would capture on d3, but instead he played the move knight takes c3, which was very unexpected, and already we can see that white is completely lost because we have to capture. And here black just plays the move queen takes d4, king h1, and queen takes c3, hitting the rook on a1 as well as the bishop on d3, and it's already very hard to defend. Bishop d2 was the only move played, and then after queen takes d3, bishop takes, queen takes d1, rook takes, and rook f to e8. We can see that we get an opposite color bishop endgame, but black's going to get two connected passed pawns on the queen side, and black went on to win fairly easily. So the second game was a very unpleasant experience I had in the Blackmar Diemer Gambit, which up until this particular game no one had really taken advantage of. Here my opponent played the move pawn to d5, a very clever response by James, since he knew that I often always answered with pawn to d4 and I never played the mainline captures. The problem with playing a very narrow repertoire consisting of mainly gambits. So after knight f6, f3, we get the usual, and here black plays the move bishop to f5. This is a very good response, and I think the structures where you play bishop f5 and c6 are a good way to pose problems for white here. I opted for knight to h4, but I think knight to e5 in hindsight would have also been a good option. Bishop c4. And it turns out capturing the bishop on g6 is probably not the best idea, since it opens up the h-file, and also the bishop on g6, even though it looks good, black is happy to exchange these off since he's already a pawn up, and it improves his pawn structure somewhat. b5 may be a tad provocative, but it's still okay. The problem here with white's position is that we never really develop any initiative against the black king, and despite having these weaknesses on the queen side, it's very hard to take advantage of it. And at the end, black is just a pawn up. So we do try some tricks here, but they're just not working. We even sacrificed the exchange. A little bit dubious because we don't really get too much for it. The idea was to go d5 and hopefully get black to take with the c-pawn, but it never quite worked. Queen b4, again setting up rook takes b5, which didn't work. And eventually we just end up losing all our pawns. And black will go for a counterattack, and as you can see, the king will get mated in the center very shortly. So this was definitely an unpleasant experience and not one you want to happen in such a big event. So even though I wasn't having much luck and success with my gambits throughout this particular event, I was trying out other opening ideas at the time, and one opening I was playing a lot was the Trompovsky with white. On move 2 we played a move bishop to g5. It's a really good opening if you want something relatively simple, but at the same time putting some pressure on black from the very start of the game. Here black played the move knight to e4, and a very interesting idea here for white, which I believe was actually developed by an Australian in Adelaide and played a lot there, which was the move pawn to h4 on move 3. The idea is that if black captures, we're going to open up the h file for our rook and put some pressure on the h7 pawn. So after d5 I played knight to d2, and here black decides to capture. We capture back and played the move bishop to f5, which is a very normal response to get the bishop outside the pawn chain, but here I had prepared a little trap, sort of a trap, or something to put a lot of pressure on black. After e3, e6, I would play the move pawn to g4, and after bishop g6, the whole idea here was to play the move pawn to f4. And often the case in, say, Caro-Kann's or Scandinavians, when this light squared bishop gets outside the pawn chain, that's not usually the end of the story, because white can put a lot of pressure on it by chasing it around with the kingside pawns. Here black played the move pawn to c5, and answered with this move queen to f3, which poses a lot of problems for black and a lot of practical problems he has to solve over the board, since the move pawn to f5 is coming next, and it's not that easy to see a good response. The best move here for black is just to play queen d7. Also, black can't capture the pawn on c2 here, because after bishop b5 check, followed by rook c1, we can see that the bishop is very short on squares, and then I follow up with the same f5 idea. So instead, black took on d4, but this runs into the move pawn to f5, and here black is losing a piece. Opted for queen takes g5, but here we just capture on g6, and after the queen trades, we can see that white will end up a material up, because we captured the pawn on e3 eventually as well, and white went on to convert the material advantage into a win. So overall, as you can see, it was a really tough event, but I did learn a lot, especially that these unsound gambits I was playing and opening ideas didn't really cut it at this level anymore, and I need to go back and come up with some major changes if I was going to see improvement the next time around. So in my next video, I'm going to talk a lot more about how to get out of this particular rating plateau that I was in and give you some tips on that. I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much for watching, and take care.